All right, so how many of you here, or I don't know, are you ready yet, or is it recording, or? Okay, I got the go ahead. So how many of you here have done malware analysis before this? So like real in-depth stuff, or just like mostly static? So all right, anybody else? Not what? Not too adaptive. Okay. Anyone else do malware analysis here? Does anybody want to learn how to do malware analysis? All right, cool. All right, awesome. So, but that's what I'm going to be basically talking about today. By trade per se, I'm not a malware analysis person. That isn't my full-time job. So over the past several years, I just find the topic fascinating, and I've been researching it. I'm kind of working in an incident response type shop, and so the reason for me learning it was just to be able to expand where I was as, you know, from just doing analyst work to maybe doing, being able to do like some quick triage stuff whenever malware came in. So there are tons of smart people that I've read their blogs and stuff, and I've tried to encapsulate that here. And so I think I give a unique perspective in that it isn't like a full-time reverse engineer malware person giving you this talk. This is somebody that's probably, you know, maybe like on your level, kind of looking at it a little from more of a newbie perspective. So yeah, so just, you know, I don't know. This is the first time I've ever put this in here just because I was trying to be funny, but opinions expressed here do not express my views or opinions of my employers, my customers, my wife, my kids, my parents, my in-laws, my high school girlfriend from Canada. They don't even express my opinions. There's some like, I'm possessed. So this is, you know, just letting you know. So don't even blame me for it, all right? Like, you can't even sue me. All right, so, but my name is Grecs. If you follow me on Twitter or you connect with me on Facebook, this is the little logo that I go with. Can anybody tell me where that logo's from? Wait a minute, not you. Yet. Anyone else? What? See, I wish I had giveaways. Are there like candies that I can throw or something? I don't know. Wait, do we have something? We have Red Bulls? Razrita? All right, well, maybe I should save this for a better question, because there's a few questions that I ask. So I'll just set this up here to tease folks. But David, what was the reference to this?
War games?
War games, yeah. So, you know, in the end screen where the machine's playing tic-tac-toe with itself. So someday Columbia Pictures they're going to come and sue me and tell me I have to change it. But until then, so I'm from the Northern Virginia area, right outside of Washington, D.C. I've started doing security, I don't know, probably way back in early 2000s. This is whenever, and the cool thing is I was doing web app stuff. So this was really cool because, you know, I even think like OWASP didn't start till '99. So I was around and kind of saw like the invention of SQL injection, at least kind of in the mainstream. But I was doing lots of cool stuff, right? You know, SQL injection, doing all the cross-site scripting, doing a little bit of pen testing too, right? But from a career perspective, I found out that you can only go so far, and I had high aspirations of being like a CEO or something like that. Along the way, I found it's no fun, which I'll talk about a little later, which is why I'm back doing this stuff. So I decided to move on for career reasons. I started doing security engineering, which is, you know, pretty fun. You create lots of documentation, like you really don't get to do that much hands-on stuff, but it does give you that fundamental knowledge. It isn't like you just throw something up and do it. It gives you that, you know, it teaches you to look at more of the problem holistically, how it's going to affect things. So then I started doing, since I'm in the Washington, D.C. area, started doing government stuff. So FISMA, certification and accreditation. Now it's called ANA. So they've came up, NIST came out with their new, instead of doing the old CNA stuff, it's the risk management framework, right? So it's called ANA. And so they're just all the fun things. So, I was once again producing more documentation here, but it's a cool job, or I would say it's a cool job, but it's good. They need people to do it, and you make pretty good money that way. Unfortunately, it's like no fun at all. So then it even got worse for me, because my company's like, hey, you've been around for 5, 10, 15 years. You should help us write props. So I won't even go there, but whatever. So all along the way, I was creating this, right? I was creating massive amounts of documentation and paper, and to really be, I don't even think a lot of it was even read. It's kind of one of those compliance-y things where you had to go and just do it, and they skimmed it and said, yep, check, you got that. You're secure, right? So meanwhile, all this cool stuff was going on, and I was just doing this crap, right? So I wasn't having too much fun. So it made me want to do this. So I thought a bit. So I kind of tried to reevaluate my career, decided that I did not want to become a CEO for like some big DoD agency or anything like that. So I went back down, started doing just, learning more about some of the different security tools that are out there, really trying to understand what the pros and cons of each one are, doing trade studies. Really worked a lot with vendors, and, maybe you can have a beard and I talk about that, right? So anyway, vendors are vendors, right? So currently what I'm doing is I'm doing training, IT security training. So it's a pretty fun job because I get to like make up my own stuff, do some hands-on stuff, but then really put together a whole training program for the current program that I'm working on. So I'm still producing some of this. I'm drinking better versions of this. And in the evenings, when I'm, I guess, doing my training, planning, because when you have a salary job, you train during the day and you create classes in the night, right? So, but in the evening, I do spend time trying to do, all these cool tools come out and I want to try them, test them, maybe learn a little bit of malware analysis, right? So, but in the evening, I kind of do that and I publish it on a website that I've run. I don't know, it's been up since like 2008. I have about like, I don't know, probably about 1,200 blog posts now. But it's, like if you're in the Northern Virginia area, it's news, events, and resources for folks that are there. So I also, who goes to ShmooCon if you can get tickets, right? So for the past few years, I've run the Fire Talks there. So that's a blast. I have a lot of fun there. So anyway, now I'm kind of in this happy panda state. So that's a little bit about me, but what I want to do is talk about malware analysis. And so this is what I'm going to go through. We have our introduction, like we always do. We always end with our conclusion, and then in between the sandwich bit there, I'm going to talk about, first of all, what is malware analysis? I'm also going to talk about what you need from an environment perspective to set that up and actually do it. And then I'm going to go through a methodology. And I've tried to make it real easy. I know a lot of people are against checklists, right? Especially in the security community, but I created a checklist, at least, and I refer to it as more of a loose framework. Hey, these are things you definitely want to do, but, at a certain point, it becomes more of an art form, and it's sort of this iterative process where you find something new and you have to go back and test it, and then you find something new and you go back and test that. So I have sort of this framework methodology, and then also, since this is just a 101 class, one of the goals here is that you could come out of here and with the steps that I've provided, set up your own malware analysis environment. And then lastly, where to learn more. So as I had a little star on the title of this talk, if you didn't see. All right, I'm not gonna. Oh, Sarah just came in. I'm gonna have to start over. So, no. But anyway, I have my little disclaimer there that most people do not become ninjas in 60 minutes, but whatever. Sorry about that. Yep, and where to learn more. You know, just interesting resources that you can go to, free, paid courses, certifications, fun stuff like that. And then lastly, just close down shop, and hopefully within less than 60 minutes. So unfortunately, we started this session about 10 minutes late, but unfortunately, we're probably not going to make up any time by the end of my talk, just unfortunately. Unless everyone gets bored and they want me to speed up, and that's what I'll do. So what this is written for are just what I've geared this presentation towards are general security practitioners that want to basically learn more about how to do malware analysis, what you need to do it, what are the steps to you know, go through that process, and then lastly, where to learn more. Like I work in an incident response environment right now, so I work with a lot of analysts that some are just, you know, hey, they just want to watch the screen, but others are a little bit more motivated that want to take things to the next level. So if you currently work in a SOC, maybe this is a way where you can bring your, you know, learn a little bit of malware analysis triage, and this can take your skills to another level so that you can maybe grow in your career there. So introduction, the first thing that I want to talk about is what is malware analysis, right? So anybody besides what I have on the screen? Oh, shoot, I should. Okay, what is malware analysis? Anybody? Maybe this is, what? Everything on the next screen, right? What is malware analysis?
Taking malware apart, finding out what it was doing so you can make it not do that.
Taking malware apart, yes, Sarah. Debugging a binary, yep. Any other ideas here? Nope, nothing. Nowhere. What? Reverse engineering, yeah. Well, reverse engineering is this like huge field, and I think I kind of think of malware analysis as one small sliver, but yeah. But anyways, this is the way I defined it. No one gave my smart-ass answer for the analysis of malware, right? So, but anyway, so I went out to Wikipedia and did the different forensics blogs and places like that, and I tried to figure out, you know, hey, well, what's the official definition of what malware analysis is? And I couldn't find anything. So I just came up with my own, and it's basically reversing engineering. The gentleman up front said that to understand how it works and what it does. I generally break malware analysis down into 3 parts. Other people break it down into different parts, but there's the triage stage. So this is the thing that I think most, you know, analysts or most people should be able to do fairly easy. Dynamic analysis is a little bit harder because you have to have some sort of an environment set up so that you can run the malware and then analyze what it does. And then lastly, static analysis. So the gentleman in the back here was talking about this is where I'm going to open up in a debugger, disassemble it, and really look at the assembly code, the machine language, and try to understand what it's doing. I'm going to reference this person a lot throughout the presentation because he puts a lot of awesome stuff together, is Lenny Zeltser. So recently he put out a blog post which is Mastering the 4 Stages of Malware Analysis. And you should definitely go check out that article. I think the only difference between how he kind of categorized it and me is I combined the fully automated analysis and the static property analysis as one step where I just call triage. So first of all, defining what triage is. Once again, I couldn't find a good malware analysis official definition of triage, so I just came up with my own, and I'm defining it as quickie analysis to understand as much as possible about the malware. So, and this is usually, except for one small part, by not executing it. Some of the goals that I talk about that you want to do there is basically just gain a gist of what the malware is and what it could do. Some of the things that you may want to look for there are determining the basic running properties, and there's automated analysis tools. So you run the malware, you put the malware into this automated tool, and it runs it, and it tries to do this kind of quickie understand or analysis of what it could be doing, and I'll talk about that later. see if others found. So, take the hash of the malware, search on it at VirusTotal, even just Google, and see if anybody else has found it. And then analyze the file properties. So looking at things, like the type of file it is, the type of libraries that it's importing, information like that. And so basically what that's called is PE examination, where the PE is the header of a file, or an executable. And last but not least is strings. This is just awesome. You basically have some sort of binary compiled file, and you run strings on it, and you get and you may learn some interesting things like you may get domain names, IP addresses, or just little bits and pieces like that that'll help you, at least at the first level, get a basic understanding of what this malware could be doing. So step 2. So I gotta do it. So is that enough? Right? Anybody? We what? Step 2. No. We need to go deeper, right? All right. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about dynamic analysis, and kind of once again, no formal definition, but we're basically going to execute the malware and watch what it does. And the goals here are just to acquire a basic understanding of, whenever that malware runs, what types of things does it do? Does it connect out to certain IP addresses, domain? Does it create registry keys? Does it delete files? Does it disable AV? Just general stuff like that. And so I kind of broke it down into 3 parts here, where we want to sense the host changes, and I already talked about some of those there, the registry changes, file changes, things like that. Uncover runtime properties. So this is where you would use tools for analysis, like monitoring the processes that it creates. You could even do memory analysis tools too. So there's tools that you can use, take a snapshot of memory and get some ideas of what stuff's going on there. That kind of goes a little bit into more forensic-y sort of stuff, but it could still be useful in just doing basic malware analysis. And then the last thing that you probably the last goal is to reveal network activity. So this is basic, TCP, UDP, all that sort of fun stuff. See IP addresses that it's connected to, host names, and then the different protocols that it might be using, DNS, HTTP, etc. And then this is just a quickie process for dynamic analysis. So you establish some sort of base environment. You have this set of applications that you've set up that are going to monitor the malware. So you start those up. You execute the malware, and then you just sort of wait. And it could be, depending on the type of analysis you're doing, it could just be, hey, wait, see activity start up, and then it dies down, like within less than 15 minutes. Or it could be something that you could, it could take half hour, it could take days, weeks, whatever. It just depends how deep you want to go, right? So then at some point you stop the monitoring applications, and then at that point you do the deep dive analysis of the differences of the baseline and what you currently have. Is that enough? No. Is Sarah the only one that's going to do it? No? But
dynamic doesn't tell me what the code's doing.
Yeah, dynamic, right? Yeah. Do you think we need to go further? Yeah, we need to go deeper, right? Okay, but sometimes that can be kind of crazy.
Oh my God.
All right. So, and then here's more crazy stuff, right? So, that can be crazy stuff, okay? So, but this is where we get into the static analysis. And there are people that have done this for like decades, trying to understand this stuff. And I think somebody that's trying to learn malware analysis, it's something that you want to be aware of, but it's really trying to understand how, disassemble that malware down to the basic machine components, and trying to understand what's going on there is very it can take a lot of practice, a lot of experience. And just for that people don't know, so the code on the left there is, hey, I write this C program, it looks like that, and I compile it, and it basically looks like this is the machine language on the right. So you're basically down to the machine level stuff where you're pushing and popping stuff onto the registry, not the registry, the stack. You're saving variables in registries, and then you're saying, hey, add registry A to registry B, and then that gets your answer. So it's really, you know, the machine language binary step by step. So it can be hard. I mean, and there are tools that make it easier, such as like Ollie Debug and IDA Pro, which I'm going to talk about a little later. Okay, so everybody puts cats in their pictures, and I was talking with Sarah last night, and I was like, you know, I'm going to put dogs, because dogs get no love, okay? I'm a dog person, so. All right, so the next thing that I want to touch on is the environment. And so if you're really doing some, you know, just basic malware analysis, I'm going to try to go through some of the basic platforms that you may want to set up, and then also what your different options are. You know, platform, we're going to talk about a virtual environment, which most people seem to prefer. And then the physical one where, hey, well, a lot of malware will be able to detect that it's running in a virtual machine. So in a lot of cases, like if you can't trick it, you may have to run it in a physical environment. And then kind of the options. So we talked a little bit about this where you're doing automated analysis. You just submit malware to some box and it automatically processes it for you. And then single box. So this is where you're doing all your analysis on a single machine or a single virtual machine. But in some cases, you may need to trick the malware, and so a lot of people will add this second box, which will usually be for, you know, examining the infected box from an external perspective. So usually this is like some sort of gateway box, and then you can do fun things like scan it with Nmap to see from outside to see what ports that it opens up, pull all the network traffic. So virtual. So we all, I mean, so, you know, we saw on the previous slide. So VMware, VirtualBox. I don't know, what are the other ones out there? That's about all, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's Zen.
Zen, yeah. So, yeah. So there's a few, but I think, you know, if I would really, you know, push folks to maybe go, well, at least on the Mac, it's not that bad because it's only like $100 for VMware Fusion, but VMware Workstation is awesome. And I know there's VMware Player, which is basically free, that it will allow you to create VMs too. Unfortunately, it doesn't support snapshotting, but there's tricks that you can do. But it's the virtual environment. It's very easy to set up. So you can set it up, run your malware. You can have snapshots of different phases. So you can have an XP box, and you can say, all right, you can have a snapshot at like XP, you know, I don't know, just XP. You can have a version at Service Pack 1, Service Pack 2, Service Pack 3, right? And then a lot of people will set those up, and they'll have snapshots, and they'll do the same thing for like Win 7, Win 8, Win whatever the next one is, right? Win 8.1, right? So a lot of people will do that. And then also, but like I said, some of the negative part of this is some of the malware will be able to detect that it's running in a virtual machine, and it would automatically terminate. So it makes it a little harder. Now there's tricks that you can do, like for those really advanced folks, they'll run the malware and they'll stop it, and then they'll go up into memory and they'll pull out the checks that check for if it's running in a virtual machine. That's like really advanced stuff that, you know, that's like Kung Fu stuff. I don't know how they do it, right? So, and then also the physical one. So if you're not able to, if the malware is looking, if it's in a virtual machine and stopping and you can't trick it, you may have to fall back to just using a physical box. But unfortunately, the downside with this is that it's fairly resource intensive. You need to dedicate this whole box to it. And you know, what's nice about a virtual environment too is if you run the malware and you're like, oh, I screwed that up, right? Like you can easily just say, oh, I'll just revert back to my snapshot. You know, it takes less than 10 seconds, right? But with a box, I mean, you have to like, theoretically, you have to go like reinstall the operating system, blah, blah, blah. Now, there's like, you know, Norton Ghost and things like that. So there's solutions for it, but it's just not as, you know, as easy as it is with a virtual environment. Yes?
Well, you don't really know what you're dealing with when you're doing analysis. And
True.
I have a healthy fear of malware, specifically stuff that moves into like my drive firmware
Yeah, yeah.
or my BIOS.
Yeah.
And so when you're running on physical, like, do you ever really know if you can trust the machine?
No.
Okay.
I mean, that's some pretty advanced stuff, but yeah. That's a little bit beyond my, that's out of scope for this talk. Let's put it that way.
Good answer, sir. Okay.
All right, so some of the different options. So there's the automated stuff. So this is where you have this environment, like a lot of you may have heard of Cuckoo Sandbox, you know, tools like that where you can just run the malware and it automatically does stuff. So I've already touched a little bit on that. And then the single box, this is where you can do some basic triage and dynamic analysis on a single machine. And then lastly is where you put in the dual box. Now here, the only thing that I really want to say is from a dual box perspective, like if you're running it on a single box, you kind of have to worry about, because theoretically the malware could sabotage the results, right? But if you have this second box that is independent of that malware, it helps mitigate some of that. So it may be good to have that second box just as a second option too. You obviously can't get detailed information, but it helps you maybe just correlate some of the findings that you're seeing on the single box with the gateway. So automated analysis, I already talked about this. So malware.com. The people that wrote Cuckoo Sandbox wrote this, and it's pretty cool because they have this checkbox here, which if you can't read it, it says share the sample. By default, the check mark's off, right? So, but they claim that, hey, we don't, you know, whenever you submit malware to us, we don't, you know, it's just used for research purposes. We don't like collect it and sell it, things like that. But there's other sources, like the first one I ever heard of was the Norman Sandbox. So that's still out there. And GFI Sandbox and Nubus Threat Expert. And there's some other ones there too. So there's like, you know, these quickie free online services that you can use. But if you work for a large corporation that doesn't, you know, they don't want to risk having something associated with them out there available to anyone else. So what they'll usually do is they can run things in-house so that any malware that they analyze isn't available to the greater community at large. So there's commercial products. So all these free guys also have commercial versions where you can buy them and have hosted environments within your corporate infrastructure. And then open source, there's Cuckoo Sandbox. And there's a cool project, unfortunately it doesn't work, but it's called Zero Wine. So you can actually go and you can basically do Windows malware analysis in Linux, and it uses Wine. But unfortunately, it doesn't work. But it's a cool idea if anybody wants to pick that up. But at a minimum, you know, in-house, a corporation or a small company could just have one box, like loaded with different AV solutions. So you hope that, you know, probably if it's a new piece of malware, the signature part of it isn't going to work, right? But maybe the heuristic part of it will pick up things. And obviously, whenever, like, don't run, like, if you have 10 AV products, don't run them all at the same time because they'll, like, fight it out. So you may want to just, you know, you kind of start one up and do the analysis and then start the second one. And you really want to do that. And there's the static scanning where you can like run it from the command line. And unfortunately, that just uses the signatures. But that's what some folks do. So automated analysis, Cuckoo Box is awesome. I think like in the past 2-3 months back, they finally put out version 1. This kind of summarizing some of the data that's captured here, the API calls, network traffic, screenshots, file assembly, instructions. So it's an awesome tool. You can set this up. It's basically usually like the standard setup is usually you have some Linux box like Ubuntu, and then you install the Cuckoo environment. On top of that, you have to add in most cases VirtualBox, and then you have a Windows VM that runs within VirtualBox. It can be a little frustrating to set up, but the good news is you go through the pain once and you get it set up and you basically got it. And hopefully, like if you get it to work, maybe document it and write a blog post about it, and so that we can all. Anyway, so this is just a quick shot of what it looks like. I mean, you can see we're running on a Ubuntu box here, and you know, we have a command line there with Cuckoo running in the background, and then here's the Windows XP box that we're currently using. So that's just to give you an idea of what it looks like. So the single box. So we talked about our automated analysis. So the second piece is that we want to do in most cases is do some sort of dynamic analysis, usually in a single box. Now you can also use the single box environment where you can set up different tools and you can do some of the, we'll call it file property analysis stuff there. But I don't know, personally, I just, you know, had this old XP license, and I've like, you know, it's probably, I don't know, what, 13 years old now, right? But I just have had that, and I usually just, you know, I have several images from like a Virgin image when it was first released in like 2002 or whatever, all the way up to Service Pack 3 snapshotted at different points. But just some basic setup stuff. I used to, the Metasploit Unleashed site, they used to have a really good way to set up an XP box so that you could attack it with Metasploit, and a lot of the same points there, you know, worked well with doing malware analysis too. But at a minimum, you know, you set up your XP box. Some of the things that I like to do is, you know, turn off automatic updates, obviously, because I don't want to snap my XP box back, start it up, and then it starts downloading updates, right? Of course, we don't have to worry about that right now because it's after April 8th, right? But you can do that. And the one annoying thing is whenever you turn off stuff, it brings up this little window and says, hey, your automatic updates are turned off. And you're like, click. Cool. And then like 10 seconds later, it's like, hey, your automatic updates are turned off. Click. So I usually go in and you can disable alerts too. So where to get it, obviously, I mean, they're not selling it. But you know, you can go to, and you can do the same thing with later operating systems too. But you know, go to eBay, Newegg, wherever, like your traditional sites like that. You can usually find OEM copies. I think like last year they used to have the TechNet license, where you for $300 you could basically have access to most of the Microsoft software, not for production purposes, but for test and development. Unfortunately, they did away with that. They still have their more expensive version, which costs like $3,000 or something. But for, you know, $50, $100, you can probably download an OEM license and have that. For the later versions, if you don't want to go that route, you can go to the Microsoft website, and I have the links there to where you can download trial copies. And there may be some limitations there, but for the person starting out, it at least gives you an inexpensive way to you know, get some Windows software so that you can do some basic malware analysis. And another interesting thought, and it's probably against their terms of service, is, you know, the cloud, right? So we can do malware analysis in the cloud. So, so unfortunately, in most cases, they don't have desktop operating systems there, but if you want to do analysis on servers, you know, hey, I'm going to go to Amazon, and, you know, it'll cost me, you know, $1 or something to have a server that I just spin up. And you can do the same thing there with snapshots and fun stuff. All right, so we have our basic operating system, right? And so these are just some basic triage tools that you may want to install on that box. This is by no means comprehensive. This are just quick list of tools just to get you started. So strings, obviously, right? Strings is like one of the core tools for doing, malware analysis, reverse engineering, forensics. It's just awesome, right? There is a newer version of strings that you can run called strings 2, and what that does is by default, whenever the old version of strings, you would just get the ASCII output, but there would be a different option that you would have to set to get any Unicode output, which are usually the two types that you're looking for. Strings 2 kind of just spits that all out together, and you don't have to worry about it. And then an older tool, but it's still good, does the job. It's a free tool from McAfee called bintext. So it's a nice GUI tool. You just kind of drag the file in, and you get all the strings associated with that. Depends if you're more of a command line person or if you're more of a GUI person. So I don't know. PE Studio. So this tool's been around for about, I don't know, probably for like a year and a half, but it's a newer tool that a lot of folks doing malware analysis are leaning to. You just drag the file in, and it does a lot of the basic analysis, and you just sort of click through some tab-like things. Pretty? Okay. And then the last one is another free tool. Well, I guess in most cases, if you're doing malware analysis, you need to have some sort of a hex editor. And there's a lot of free ones that you can use. And then there's some awesome ones that I'm going to talk about that I'm going to just reference on the next few slides that cost maybe, there's eval, but, maybe they cost like $50, $100. But if you're just starting out and you don't know, like, hey, I don't know if I want to invest $100 in like this really advanced hex editor. McAfee, once again, has this tool called File Insight. It's a little cheesy looking, kind of reminds me of Windows XP, but it's free, and it was specifically made to do malware analysis. Once again, it's a little bit older, but a hex editor is a hex editor is a hex editor, right? Right, so that's some static analysis tools, or not static, but more like file property analysis, stuff that you would be doing in the triage stage. Next, there's the dynamic analysis tool. So process monitor, and also process explorer. Those are two tools from Sys Internals, Mark Rusinovich. So he now works for Microsoft, and Microsoft actually pays him a little bit of money or a certain percentage of his time where he actually maintains those. So process monitor lets you monitor everything that not just the processes, but the file system changes, registry changes, process activity that you can watch when you're executing the malware. And then Process Explorer is like Task Manager, like on steroids. So it's an awesome tool. Just if you have a Windows box, download those and run it, even just day to day, because it gives you so much more insight into what's going on in your box. Next, you want to, obviously we want to look at any network traffic. So the old standard there is Wireshark. Obviously, if you're doing this on a Windows box, you would have to do WinPCAP2. And then lastly is Regshot, which is an open source tool that allows you to take a snapshot, run the malware, and then you take another snapshot, and you can see what the changes are. Regshot is pretty advanced too because it can also track file changes. And one of the things that you'll notice here is we have tools to a certain degree overlap some, so that's a good thing because then you can do correlation between the tools if you miss something. More, I think, dynamic analysis tools, so TCPView, so that you can just, as you're monitoring it, you can live watch it, see what sort of network connections are being made at that time. And then the last tool that I talked about is FakeNet. So this is an interesting, so you can do it on you can basically have a single box and trick the malware into thinking that it's on a network. And so that's what the FakeNet does. It was put out by the guys that did practical malware analysis. So you run it runs on a host of standard ports, and whenever the malware calls out, it will try to pretend to be like a web server or an SSH server or whatever, like an IRC server. So there's a lot of fun things you can do with it. And so that's one way, like if you just want to keep it in a single box. So from the dynamic, kind of go with the static. So we have our old, the old standbys, Ollie debug. And then also, I don't list it here, but I listed on one of the following slides is IDA Pro. So those are your two standards tools. One of the things, there's the Ollie dump plugin, which is really cool because if your malware is packed or encrypted, you need some way to, and you can't crack it. What you can do is you can put for those that did debugging, you run the program, put a stop or a breakpoint, and then so the malware runs, unencrypts itself, load it up into memory, hits the breakpoint, and then you use the Ollie dump plugin to basically pull it down from memory. So you basically bypass their obfuscation techniques. And then you have different specialized tools, whether, like if you're doing individual file analysis, say it isn't an executable or a DLL, you have, there's tools for taking apart PDF files, Flash objects, Office, Java, JavaScript. So there's a lot of other tools that you can get into as well. And these are just some of the other things that that you may want to reference. I have, like, in the center there under File Analysis Tools, I have some of the better known hex editors if you want to invest into those. And then the last thing that I talk about there is doing more of a forensics. So anything that you would do or a forensics person would do, you could also do that in analyzing malware there. And so I list some basic tools there for taking a snapshot of memory, getting a snapshot of the hard drive, and pulling that out and using some basic free analysis tools for being able to do some analysis. So baseline. So you have your single box, you've installed all these tools, right? So you want to baseline it. So this is where you go into VM and you set it as a static, or you do your snapshot. So this is something you can always go back to. I think, one of the common questions that comes up is how do you get the malware on the box, right? So what a lot of people do, like if it's located on the network, like a lot of people, they'll just temporarily turn it on to NAT, get the malware, and then turn it off. You can use, like CDs. You can use USB drives with like a physical write protect switch, so that may be safe. But at a certain point, like I said, you just snapshot it, and then that's your baseline. And then rinse and repeat. This gets back to the point where they'll take an operating system, like somebody that does this day in and day out, they'll have an operating system, and they'll snapshot it at each of the different, say, service packs. And you can do it not only for Windows XP, but for Windows Vista, Windows 7, Windows 8, whatever. So the dual box. So this is that second, like in some cases, you may want a little bit of more data externally that is less likely to have been sabotaged. So this is where you have this kind of fake gateway server. Some of the this can just be like a Linux box, and you can some of the different services that you may need to install there, like DNS and HTTP, IRC. Just basic things like that. And then whenever you do your initial analysis of the malware, you can get a feel for, it looks like it's communicating on SSL. Well, let me spin up the HTTPS daemon. And then other services, just depending what your goal is. So network analysis tools. So this is still on this second box. So you may want to install just standard tools like I talked about. Wireshark for getting all the network traffic and collecting that. Netcat, like if there's just ad hoc services that you need to start. And then Nmap, so that you can do scans of the box that you're infecting. And once again, same thing, snapshot it just to be safe, because you always want that known good state to go back to. For this second server, there's a few pre-built solutions, and one of them is the Lenny Zelser put out Remnex. I think, I don't know, probably about 6-7 months ago, he put out version 4. But you can use it in some of the different phases. You can use it in the triage phase, so you can actually load the malware on the box, and he has all the standard tools there for analyzing the files. And you can also use it for dynamic analysis, where it acts as that second box or that gateway server. And just to give you a feel, this is I think this is like version 3, but just to give you a feel, it's basically Ubuntu and just kind of like a start menu and everything's built in, right? But nobody uses a start menu thingy, right? What do we use? Terminal, yeah, right. So, as a matter of fact, like you select these, and all they do is they open up a terminal and change to that directory. But Yep. But the command line is awesome. All right. No one's telling me to repeat the question. That's good. I'm like, it's not a question. Inside joke. So malware so one of the questions that I get too is like, well, where do I start? How do I, I want to examine stuff. And so this is just a quick, some resources that I pulled together. So the practical malware analysis, there's a whole website with that, and in their labs, they actually have malware that's associated with some of their different labs. So you can get some, I guess we'll call it kind of vetted malware there. One of the most popular ones is the Camtasio. So that's, you're kind of, you can get some interesting stuff there, but you really want to be careful because this is like live, wild stuff. So Wireshark, this is, I don't know, I think it started up like about a year back, but they're still, if you want to get in, you have to know somebody and get an invite. Unfortunately, I haven't ever requested one, but, so I don't have any to give. I'm sorry. Maybe that's, like somebody answers a question and I can get them to give me one, right? And then lastly is malware.com. If you remember on the previous, when I showed the picture of the malware.com website, there was that little checkbox for share. So if somebody wants to share it, well, then you can go to malware.com and download its sample there. More puppies, right? Aww. Cute. Okay. So next is the methodology, and so this is where we're going to try, and this is like kind of your checklist approach / framework for doing it. So we'll just kind of go through the, triage, dynamic analysis, and static analysis. So here's my checklist, right? So this is, and hope everybody can see this, but so usually some of the, depending on what your corporate or your company policy is, you can run it through an internal or external sandbox, like we talked about initially, the malware.com, Norman, GFI sandbox, etc. The next thing you probably want to do is, or the last potential thing that you can do there is a corporation or a small business could have their box with all the AV stuff on it too. And then the next thing you want to do is take like a hash, whatever, and see what's out there. Go to search for that hash on VirusTotal. PE Studio has it built in, so whenever you pull a file into PE Studio, it'll actually give you the hash, and it'll automatically pull down what the VirusTotal results are if they exist. And then you can just Google the hash. And some of the goals there, just some basic file properties like when it was compiled, if it was packed, things of that nature. So kind of step C here is to determine the file type. So this is like for those Unix or Linux, this is basically just going file, and you can make sure that if it ends in an exe, that running the file command will give you the like it'll look at some of the header stuff and verify that it's an executable. Because a lot of times you'll have files that are, they'll say they're like a PDF, but they're really like an executable, and you run it and maybe it looks like a PDF, but maybe the operating system will interpret it different and actually run it. But some of the other things is you can use like the file insights. This is where you pull it up in a hex editor. look for the magic number, which are usually like the first 8 bytes. And then there's a Wikipedia page that'll talk about that. So some of the things, some of the ASCII variations. So for win executable, there's MZ. Does anybody know what MZ is? Nothing? All right. Well, no one's going to get this. This is mine then. What about PK? Come on, why don't you Google it? What's MZ? Let's. Oh yeah. So PK is zip file. So, well, but what does it stand for though? Phil Katz, yeah. So for the old. And then MZ. Did anybody? I always forget it. It's in my notes, but unfortunately my notes aren't showing here. Which kind of. Oh, it's Mark Zaboski, something like that. So anyway, they're usually, people, they invent a file format and they do fun things like that. So one of the next thing is to analyze the import. So the best thing here is, like, say you have this really advanced calculator, but then it's importing libraries associated with network connections, and it's like, that looks kind of strange. So you can just basically look for stuff like that and have it, once again, PE Studio comes back. TCPView is also a good way of looking at. And then last but not least is running strings on it, just to see if there's any ASCII or Unicode characters that are embedded there, so you can get a feel for what that does. And then I talked about depending if it's packed, there's tools that you can download just to unpack stuff. There's that ollie dump trick that I talked a little bit about earlier. And then you also have specialized tools, depending on what kind of tools you want to, depending on what type of file it is that you may have to do. So next is the dynamic analysis checklist, and this is where you establish your baseline environment. So you basically have your box, but then, or your dynamic analysis box, but in order to do the malware analysis, you may have to add in, software that's going to exploit. So you may need to, to have your baseline, add some stuff in, re-snapshot it. So then you start all your monitoring apps, and I just kind of go through the steps there with Regshot and Wireshark and Process Monitor, Process Explorer, things like that. And then you execute the malware, let it run for 15 minutes, a year, whatever. What? Yes, question.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you could give us an example of when you needed to carry out a malware analysis as opposed to just letting an antivirus program or something.
Yeah. Well, usually, so say you're a company and you have a security operations center or something like that. So and they're collecting PCAPs, right? And and they have PCAPs stored for maybe like 30 days or whatever. So say malware gets in and this box gets infected. So the AV may pick that up, right? But what they can do is they can go back, look at their PCAPs, and they can see, hey, there's this malware, and they can actually extract that from the PCAP and do a more complete analysis of that malware so that you know where to stop it next time. A lot of, like, whenever you start dealing with the advanced threats, we'll call them, right? The AV is not going to pick it up. I mean, and it's so easy to, you can take poison ivy and you just obfuscate it some, and the AV doesn't pick it up. So AV is kind of this low bar that I think anybody that really wants to get around AV can. So in a lot of cases, you would have to, AV is not going to pick it up, especially for those advanced threats. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks. What do you think of the so-called whitelist approach?
I mean, personally, I think it's great. It's very hard to implement. It's getting easier. But I think it's a good idea, definitely. But it's definitely harder to do. It's hard to implement Yeah, did you have a question?
I was just about to say, my company does application whitelisting.
Yeah.
And basically, whenever somebody says, hey, our application whitelist just popped up the thing on the screen, but I wasn't running anything,
Yeah.
that automatically triggers our incident response, and we have to start down the process of doing the static.
Yeah, exactly. So you can you can be like, oh, here's this weird file. Well, let's look at it. What's it doing? You know, is this just some benign file that accidentally got there? So yes, sir.
Even if you have a good whitelist, it doesn't mean that the tools in the whitelist can't be used to hurt you.
Exactly. Yeah, we found that out like a few months back, right? Missing certificate. And anyway, cool. Okay, so where was I? Right. So you run the malware, you let it do its thing, stop, you know, and then you basically analyze, you know, hey, this is what I started with, this is what the malware did, and this is what I ended with. And you just kind of go through that process and try to figure out what the malware did. So in the next few slides, and I'm just going to really fly through these, but it gives you kind of a graphical version of what I just went through. So, but one thing I do want to note is a lot of people, whenever they're doing analysis in a virtual environment, they'll have their VM or their analysis machine, and they'll say, oh, I'll put it in host-only mode, right? But what people don't think about is like, hey, you know, that means that your malware box can communicate with your host, right? So what you definitely want to do is set up another custom connection and connect it to that so that you can keep your host out of the loop. And then, like I said, the next few slides just show like, hey, I'm going to do my Regshot thing, start up Wireshark, start up Process Monitor. This is what Process Explorer looks like. Gives a nice hierarchy of how all the processes are related with each other. And this is what FakeNet looks like. So you can see as it's starting up, you can see, oh, it's going to start, you know, it's starting up a listener on 80.443, 8.443, etc., right? And then this is TCPView, right? So you can actually see, like, if you look on the left there, you'll see FakeNet about 15 times. So those are all the listeners associated with FakeNet. So lastly, you double-click your executable. A lot of times it may come as a DLL, so there's a little trick for running DLLs. And then depending on the type of malware you're looking at, you may have to, you know, visit a website or something like that. And then you basically watch what goes on. You have all your monitoring tools up, and you just sort of watch what's going on. And then at some point, you decide that you're going to shut things down. So you take your second snapshot, do compare, stop Wireshark, save it off, save your process monitor results, Control-C to stop your FakeNet, and then you just save your logs for future reference, and then do the comparison of everything of, hey, this is what it looked like before, this is what it looks like after. So the next thing is static analysis, and like you can it's really hard, and I'm by no means a static analysis person, but you know, back in the day I took like a class, so I understand, like years ago in college, right? I took this assembly language class, so I understand some of the basic concepts there, but it's really you disassemble it, you open it up in something like Ollie Debug or IdaPro, and you just sort of try to understand it. And the longer you do this, like after a few years, you'll see this, you'll just know it and just start to see patterns. And it's more of an art form that you just got to put the time in and actually learn it. But, you know, IdaPro is pretty nice. You can open it up, and it gives kind of this graphical view of how or of the assembly instructions, how they're being run. So you may want to check that out. But like I said, it takes talent. More puppies, right? So where to learn more? So opensecuritytraining.info, they actually have a whole malware analysis kind of track. So there's a lot of great training there. Some of them will have videos associated with it. Some of them will just have slides, and they'll just sort of take you through doing it. following some of their recommended books. As part of that, one of those classes is based on the Practical Malware Analysis book. So, I mean, that should be your first step. If you're interested in doing malware, if you take one thing out of this talk, just go buy that book. And actually, there's Hacker Academy, which I kind of have an associate deal with, but if you can sign up, and they have some basic reverse engineering and digital forensics courses. So, and the one thing that I want to do here is, this is a good thing, and it's a chance for me to advertise and make a little bit of money for my site. But one thing is that if anybody signs up over the next 3 days, I'm going to, all that money that I make is just going to go to Notacon. Because I want to come back next year. Where to learn more, I talked about Lenny Zeltser, that's his website. Certifications, there's SANS, the GREM, if you have the money. If you don't care about quality that much, you can go for GHFI. There's NIST that you can learn more about there, so there's the fun government documents there. That's a great place to start. And actually, if anybody, I'm here and I'm just going to be hanging out, if anybody wants to get together, this afternoon or tomorrow morning and just want to go through a little workshop or something like that, just follow me on Twitter, grecs, and maybe we can set something up. So this is just my conclusion slide, and since I'm running up right on 60 minutes here, I actually have 30 seconds left now. Okay, so that's all. But yeah, so one of the things that I want to know, if these slides are already on SlideShare, so go to grecs Notacon, and you can go there and view the slides there. My Twitter, my website, my contact stuff, and if you're interested, the grecs Hacker Deal bit.ly link, if you sign up for that in the next 3 days, we'll say Monday night, basically. I'm going to take anything that I make there and just give it off to Notacon. So I don't have any time for questions, but I'll be right outside after this if people want to talk. And I just want to thank everybody for coming. I want to thank Notacon for having me. Anyway, thank you.